Captain Fortescue, it's me, Canny Tim. Does the battle go well?
Pardon me for digging up the past, but as I look back upon my once beloved Medieval, I can only view it today as something of a bare bones offering. Obviously, the visual shortcomings have been addressed in today's remastering. Developer Other Ocean has polished Sir Daniel Fortescue's armour and his kooky little world into a high 4K sheen. Be that as it may, there's still a musty odour emanating deep down from inside Medieval's marrow. Long story short, 20-year-old game mechanics have come back to haunt the living. Before I drag out this remastered skeletons from the closet, let's bring the less crusty among you up to speed on what a Medieval is. Hailing from a time when Ricky Martin was still on the charts and relevant, and when Seinfeld was wrapping things up, this 1998 hack-and-slash platformer became a cult hit that only moderately impressed critics. Personally, I liked it a lot more than most. Something tickled me about the horror comedy underdog story of Sir Dan, an accidentally resurrected hero who, despite the song sang about him, was a fraud. Poor bastard copped an arrow in the eye hole during his very first battle charge, and now all of the NPCs just love to take the piss out of him because of it. The premise here then is to affix your remaining eyeball onto the path of redemption after Dan's nemesis tries his hand at necromancy and world domination. You'll need to bust your way out of your crypt and leapfrog about, collecting keys, runes, and slaying your fellow living impaired. Combat is definitely the main focus here, as opposed to Crash Bandicoot style jumpy. To that effect, you're given a variety of degradable and permanent shields and weapons, including enchanted swords, gigantic hammers. Hell, you can even pop off your own arm and use it as a club.
Back from the battle so soon? It must think it is a hero by now.
Guiding you through these individual levels, and also in the hallowed hub world that is the Hall of Heroes, are a variety of smart-ass gargoyles and a new narrator voiced by the talented Lani Minella. Speaking of sounds, much of the original audio has been retained and lovingly enhanced from the original. For example, the soundtrack has been completely re-recorded by the Prague Symphony Orchestra, and Sir Dan's old voice actor returns to do his hilariously muffled dialogue. Because hey, it's tough to enunciate when your lower jaw got lost decades ago. With regards to new bells and whistles, Other Ocean apparently had access to the original creators, and they discovered dribs and drabs of cut content when they mined the old source code. I wouldn't get too excited here though. I mean, we're only talking the occasional flourish and addition to the lore, like here and there. That said, mercifully, the bosses have seen upgrades. Many of them have had their patterns made more complex, which I really appreciate. And, unfortunately, I mean, that's pretty much where all the creature comforts come to a screeching halt. The camera system is better, but it's still awful in too many places. A lot of the problems stem from you just never really knowing when you can use the right stick to pan around at all. It feels like half of the areas in the game allow it, and then the other half of the game just doesn't. And I mean, the obvious flow-on effect from that is, combined with Sir Dan's insta-death aversion to water, you get a bunch of frustrating deaths. And I also took a few unfair trips to the game over screen, because during some platforming sections, some of the fancy new vegetation introduced just served to blind me, mid-leap. Speaking of ignominious undeaths, it's weird to me that restarting a level gives you the health bar that you initially started with, no matter the circumstance. Now let me explain this a little bit better. Imagine you slog through a maze of an ant tunnel, collecting maybe a dozen well-hidden items along the way before beating an ant queen boss with a bee's dick of life to spare. Once you've done that, you're going to start the next level of the game with that little stinger's worth of health. At this point you will probably die, and now you're stuck in this little respawn loop where you won't have enough HP to win through. Now, you'd think manually clicking restart level would solve that. It doesn't. You have to exit to the hub, drag your fetid ass back to a less taxing world, and refill your life at a font in there. It's a pain. If Sir Dan had a full set of pearly whites, he'd be grating them at this point. Even worse, had you have died to that Ant Queen boss instead, the sadistic old checkpoint system would have just slung you back 15 minutes or so, right at the start of that confusing, subterranean collect fest that wasn't even fun the first time around. Setbacks like this just go on as the game progresses. And make no mistake, this is OG difficulty that has not been tuned for a younger, more modern audience. So if you're thinking about buying for your kids, think again. And while we're talking time, lengthwise you're looking at about like a 7-hour runtime. That's not the best. Mind you, this is budget priced at 40 Australian bucks. US folks, you'll have to do your own conversions here. Moving on, I can't exactly heap praise on the combat either. Sir Dan is this awkwardly built chap whose melee skills are just thrashtacular. You simply line up a group of foes and either shoulder barge through or just go wading in and spinning with your left stick as you mash square. There's virtually no physics at play here, no feedback. Basically, if you didn't grow up with this game, you'd think this combat was a little boneheaded. In closing, I think there's always an argument to be made for keeping an old game's quirks intact to preserve nostalgia, but there's also a line where useless things ought to be killed off for good. That said, I have to acknowledge that only the die-hard fans of the hard-dying Dan Fortescue will probably enjoy this. The timeless, Tim Burton-esque charm and the fine Lazarus job done on the visuals can only take this so far. In the end, these old bones just creak too much. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about Medieval. If you're interested in seeing the game just as is, I've got a link in the description and probably on the screen right now of the first 35 minutes, zero commentary. So yeah, make up your own mind, and as always, thanks very much for stopping by.